My name is Daniel Hughes, and I just turned 35 this year. It has been exactly 5 years since I last returned home, to the house in Los Angeles that Olivia and I built together after our wedding. For those 5 years, I lived in Sweden, burying myself in work to expand the market for Lane Global Logistics Group, the massive logistics corporation owned by my father-in-law, Richard Lane. I never boasted about my role, even though in reality I was essentially in charge of nearly the entire European project. I stayed silent, accepting the Lane family's view that I was just the son-in-law working for hire. I thought that as long as I tried hard, as long as the project succeeded, everything would be fine. Our marriage would grow stronger, and most importantly, my mother, Margaret Hughes, would be at ease. My mother is now 62 years old. When I decided to move to Sweden, I convinced her to live with Olivia. I didn't want her alone in the old house on the outskirts, growing old without anyone by her side. I trusted Olivia, my wife, to care for her like family. Olivia had promised me that in person, her voice sweet, eyes sparkling. "I'll treat your mother like my own." The project in Sweden finally stabilized. I requested a longer leave than planned. I wanted to return early to create a small surprise for the two most important women in my life. I didn't tell anyone, just quietly bought a ticket and took the long flight down to Los Angeles. The plane landed in the late afternoon. I rented a car at the airport and drove home myself. On the way, I smiled to myself. I imagined Olivia shrieking and throwing her arms around me, my mother with tears in her eyes from the surprise. I pictured the warm house, Mom sitting in her armchair reading a book, Olivia perhaps cooking something in the kitchen, the smell of food wafting through, laughter filling the air. 5 years of separation would end with a tight embrace. The familiar road appeared, trees lush on both sides, the white house with its white wooden fence. Everything looked the same. I parked in front of the gate. The exterior was still neat and quiet as always. The lawn meticulously trimmed, flowers blooming brightly in the garden. I stepped out of the car, taking a deep breath of the warm California air. My heart raced with excitement. I didn't go straight through the front door. I wanted to peek through the window first to see them before making my surprise appearance. I tiptoed into the yard, approaching the living room window that overlooked the kitchen. And then, I froze. My mother was in the kitchen. She stood at the stove, slowly stirring a pot, my eyes following her every small movement. Her actions were neat and practiced, as if she had repeated this routine for years. There was no relaxed ease, just the quiet focus of someone accustomed to standing at the stove every day. The clothes she wore were old and faded. A plaid shirt I remembered her wearing at home years ago. Her back was slightly hunched, her steps slower than before. She no longer had the appearance of a mother enjoying a peaceful retirement, but rather like a full-time housekeeper. I scanned for Olivia. She was sitting on the living room sofa, right in my line of sight, legs crossed, posture relaxed, eyes glued to her phone screen. She scrolled continuously, occasionally chuckling softly at something on it. Completely detached from the kitchen, from my mother bustling behind her. Olivia didn't once look up as my mother worked in the kitchen. She stayed seated, showing no sign of getting up to help or check in. Her gaze never turned toward my mother, as if that effort didn't exist. My mother's presence in this house seemed to have become taken for granted, a part of daily life that no one needed to acknowledge. I stood frozen outside the window. A gentle afternoon breeze blew, but I felt a chill down my spine. My teeth clenched, not from pain, but from the anger rising steadily in my chest. It didn't explode immediately, it simmered, heavy, like a ticking time bomb. I had been looking forward to a warm reunion, but in this moment I knew clearly, this trip home wasn't the end of our separation. It was the beginning of a major storm. I couldn't stand there forever. My hands clenched into fists, and then I stormed straight into the house. I pushed the front door hard. The hinges creaked loudly, echoing through the quiet space. The house seemed to shudder, items on the table rattling slightly. Both my mother and Olivia jumped and turned sharply. Olivia was sitting on the sofa, phone still in hand. She froze for a moment when she saw me, eyes widening in surprise. I clearly saw a flash of panic, Her mouth parted as if to say something, but in an instant it was masked by her familiar composed expression. She sat up straighter, forcing an awkward smile. "Daniel, when did you get back? Why didn't you tell me?" But I didn't respond to her. My eyes were fixed on the scene in the kitchen. My mother was still standing there, holding a dishcloth, face flushed from exertion. She looked at me with overwhelming joy, unable to hide it. "My son is back. Come here, let me take a good look at you." Her voice trembled, eyes glistening with tears. She dropped the cloth and hurried toward me, her steps slightly limping with age. I hugged her, but my mind was still reeling with anger. Her warmth spread through me, but it only made the pain worse. For 5 years away, I had dreamed of this moment countless times. A warm embrace, joyful laughter. And now, my mother looked like a servant while my wife sat there like a queen. I released my mother and turned sharply to Olivia. My gaze was ice cold. "Why have you let Mom do all this? Cleaning, cooking like a maid, while you sit there casually scrolling on your phone?" Olivia blinked, her initial surprise quickly turning to annoyance. Her face darkened, lips pressed tight. She stood up, arms crossed over her chest, voice sharp and high-pitched. "What are you talking about? I was busy with my own things. My work, not sitting idle. And Mom does it willingly. I didn't force her. She said she likes doing it to keep herself occupied, so I just let her." My voice dropped lower but weighed heavily on the room's atmosphere. My heart pounded furiously, hot blood surging with each beat. "Willingly? Look at Mom. Look at the old faded clothes she's wearing. Look at her hunched back from exhaustion. Is that willing?" I took another step forward, eyes locked on hers. 5 years ago, you told me yourself that you would care for Mom like family while I was away. Is this how you care for her?" Olivia let out a laugh, dry and harsh. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. She has hands and feet, doing a little housework. What's the big deal? Sitting around doing nothing would be the real problem. Don't come back after all this time and see everything in such a negative light." The atmosphere in the house suddenly grew tense, like a string about to snap. Olivia said no more. She turned abruptly, strode quickly to the bedroom, and slammed the door. The click of the lock sounded dry and cold, like a challenge. I stood frozen in place, chest heaving, breathing heavy. My mother stood quietly for a moment, her eyes looking at me with both concern and sorrow, as if she feared everything was escalating too far because of her. She stepped closer, wrapping her thin arms around me tightly despite her trembling hands from fatigue. She spoke softly, voice so quiet it almost dissolved into the air. "Son, don't let a small thing ruin your marriage. This little housework is nothing. I'm used to it." I froze instinctively. The familiar warmth from her, the scent of soap mixed with kitchen smells, flooded back, making me ache with memories of the years away. Those 5 years in Sweden, the cold, lonely nights, I often thought of this embrace. It was the only thing that kept me steady. Now it temporarily quelled my anger, giving way to a surge of regret and pity. I guided my mother to sit on the sofa, gently stroking her back. "Mom, sit and rest. Let me finish for you." She shook her head, but I insisted. She sat down, voice full of worry. "Are you okay? How's work over there? Are you eating properly? I've worried about you so much, Daniel. All these 5 years, I just wanted you to come home safe." I quietly observed her as she asked her questions. Her hair had gone noticeably grayer, no longer the scattered black strands from the last time I saw her. The wrinkles on her face were deeper, around her eyes and mouth. Her eyes shone with the joy of reunion, but behind it lay unspoken things, sadness, fatigue, perhaps even hurt. I was about to speak. The questions were on the tip of my tongue, but before I could voice them, my mother seemed to sense it. She quickly grasped my hand, squeezing gently as if to stop me. "I know what you're going to ask," she said softly. "Don't overthink it and get angry at Olivia because of me. As long as you and your wife live peacefully, I'm happy." She lowered her head slightly, voice slowing. "I do these chores just to keep my hands and mind busy. In old age, sitting idle feels empty. Hearing that, I fell silent. I didn't ask more, but deep down I knew clearly that avoidance wasn't the real answer. My mother was always like this. She took everything on herself to protect everyone. I rolled up my sleeves and joined her in the kitchen. I washed vegetables, stirred the pot, wiped the table, trying to share the tasks she shouldn't have shouldered alone. She looked at me, eyes misty. My son has grown up. He even knows how to cook now. We worked in silence, only occasionally with her asking more about life in Sweden. I answered briefly, trying to keep my tone cheerful, but my mind was still reeling. Olivia stayed in the room, not a sound. The anger simmered, waiting for a chance to erupt. When dinner was served, the aroma of food filled the house. I called Olivia, but she emerged from the room, face stony. She didn't sit down with us, just said curtly, "I have urgent business. I need to go out right now." Then she grabbed her bag and left, the door slamming behind her. The large house suddenly held only my mother and me, sitting across from each other at the dining table. The atmosphere was so quiet you could hear every small movement. The clink of spoons against bowls, the sound of swallowing. My mother ate slowly in small bites, as if not wanting to disturb. I looked at her, a heaviness rising in my heart greater than during the argument with Olivia. My wife's absence wasn't just an excuse, it was the first sign of a deeper rift waiting ahead. I knew tonight would not be peaceful. I lay on the bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The ticking of the clock echoed in my head, each second and minute stretching endlessly. The image of my mother in the kitchen kept flashing back, her hunched back wiping the floor wearing those old clothes, and Olivia sitting there with her phone, indifferent as if nothing was happening. For 5 years away, I had imagined this homecoming countless times, warm, joyful, the family gathered together. And now, it all felt like a cruel joke. I tossed and turned, trying to sleep but unable to. The anger still simmered, mixed with a vague unease. Something was wrong. What was my mother hiding? What had Olivia done during the years I was absent? The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The early sunlight filtered through the curtains, but my mind remained heavy, as if something was pressing down on it. The feeling from the previous night hadn't faded. It lingered quietly, turning into a nameless anxiety. I washed my face and took a deep breath to calm myself. Today, I would take my mother out for a walk. Just the two of us, no Olivia, no one else interfering. I needed to hear her speak, to know what had happened in the 5 years I was gone. She couldn't keep hiding it from me anymore. I stepped out of the bedroom. The house was still silent. Olivia had been out all night and hadn't returned. Her phone lay untouched on the table, no calls, no messages. I glanced at the screen. Nothing. I didn't bother checking or calling her. Now everything between us seemed to have changed. Did she want to avoid me? Fine, if that's what she wanted. I had more important things to do. Entering the living room, I was surprised to see my mother already up very early. She was busily preparing her bag, dressed neatly, an old jacket, low-heeled shoes, as if heading out. She was tying her shoelaces, movements slightly trembling but quick. I softly called her. She startled and looked up, pausing for a moment. "Daniel, you're up early? I was going to visit a friend. I'll be back by noon." Her voice was light, but I could hear the haste clearly. She forced a smile, avoiding direct eye contact. "Which friend, Mom? Can I come along?" I asked further, trying to keep my tone normal. But she shook her head, quickly grabbing her bag. "Stay home and rest, son. I'll just be a little while." She walked to the door as if afraid of being held back. The door closed behind her, the lock clicking dryly. I stood there, unease surging strongly. Something was off. My mother wasn't the type to hide things, but this morning she was clearly avoiding me. A bad premonition rose, a vague but sharp worry. Why was she in such a hurry? Which friend required leaving so early? I grabbed the car keys and decided to follow her from a distance. I'd keep just enough space to avoid detection. I needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. I drove slowly, maintaining a safe distance. My mother walked to the nearby bus stop and boarded familiarly, as if she did this every day. I followed the bus, heart pounding. The route led into downtown, past tall buildings. The bus stopped at a place that left me stunned. Lane Global Logistics Group, the company owned by my father-in-law, Richard Lane. Why was my mother going there? I parked far away and got out, quietly following on foot. Each step felt heavier than the last. My mother turned straight into the building's logistics area, the staff entrance, without hesitation, as if she knew it all too well. That natural ease tightened my chest. I stopped behind a corner wall, holding my breath to watch unease rising with each beat. A moment later, she reappeared. My heart sank. She was wearing a janitor's uniform, simple gray-blue overalls, holding cleaning tools and a specialized cart. The bucket, mop, rags, all familiar for cleaning work. She pushed the cart, back slightly hunched, steps slow. I stood frozen from afar, body rigid. Every suspicion in my heart instantly became harsh reality. My mother, the woman who had raised me with sweat and tears, was working as a janitor here, at the Lane family's company. I didn't approach, just watched silently. My throat dry, heart clenching with each beat. How could this be? For 5 years I'd sent money home thinking she was resting. And now, she had to do this grueling work? My mother began her tasks. She bent to mop the long hallway, the vast polished stone corridor, each movement slow but skilled, clearly something she'd done for a long time. She pushed the cart, wiping every square meter, sweat beading on her forehead. Employees passed her with indifferent glances, treating her presence as invisible. They walked by, chatting animatedly, no one bothering to look down. A man in a suit, engrossed in his phone while holding a coffee cup, nearly bumped into her cart, sidestepping reflexively and continuing on, completely oblivious to her. Then something worse happened. A young woman, likely an office employee, approached in shiny high heels. As she passed, she kicked hard into my mother's bucket, whether accidental or intentional, unclear. Water splashed everywhere, spreading across the floor and soiling her own shoes. The woman stopped, looked down at her shoes, then up, frowning in annoyance. "How did you place the bucket like that? You got my shoes dirty." Without waiting for a reply, she shook her head irritably, stepped around the puddle as if avoiding something filthy, and walked away. My mother stood frozen for a few seconds. Then she quietly bent down, picked up the overturned bucket, and wiped the floor with a cloth. No protest, no complaint. Her face remained calm to the point of heartbreaking, as if this scene had repeated too many times for her to feel hurt anymore. I clenched my fists tightly, nails digging into my palms until they drew blood. Watching her endure the humiliation silently, my heart ached as if being sliced. Each bending motion felt like a knife cut into me. She was the one who had sacrificed her whole life for me, waking at dawn to work and support my education. Now reduced to this? At an age when she should be resting, she had to mop floors for ungrateful people? This was no longer just a family matter, nor the willingness Olivia had claimed. This was humiliation, contempt. Seeing my mother bend down again, silently pushing the cleaning cart along that cold, endless hallway, my heart felt crushed. Her hunched back, each slow but familiar step heartbreaking, as if this was the role she had long accepted. I stood frozen in the shadows, anger and sorrow surging together, burning in my chest. In that instant, I knew I couldn't stand watching for even one more second. I left the hallway and headed straight to the executive office area. The pent-up anger in my chest made me abandon all restraint. My footsteps echoed heavily on the polished stone floor, but my mind was filled only with images of my mother, the woman who had sacrificed her entire life for me, now bowing her head to clean for people who looked down on her. I didn't think about consequences or my position in the company. I just wanted confrontation. I wanted answers. The executive offices were upstairs. The elevator seemed to move slower than ever. I pressed the button repeatedly, heart pounding like a war drum. When the doors opened, I stormed out like a whirlwind. The chairman's office was at the end of the hallway with a glossy wooden door bearing the engraved nameplate Richard Lane. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open hard and strode in, decisive and tense. Inside, the two people startled and pulled apart almost reflexively. It was Richard Lane, my father-in-law, and his personal secretary, a young woman I had only glimpsed a few times. They were standing too close, mere inches apart, and the hurried way they tried to cover it made me sense something awkward. She quickly smoothed her hair. He adjusted his tie. But at that moment, my mind had no room for other suspicions. I didn't care what they were doing. I was seeing red with rage. Richard's face turned purple. He immediately regained his familiar stern demeanor. He gestured for the secretary to leave, voice sharp. "Sarah, get out!" She hurriedly grabbed her documents, glanced at me, and quickly walked out, closing the door behind her. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became suffocating, with just the two of us. Richard turned to me, irritation clear. "What the hell are you doing, Daniel? Barging into my office without knocking? That's incredibly rude. Who do you think you are?" I didn't respond to the reprimand. My gaze turned icy, staring straight at him. My voice was low but strained. "Why is my mother working as a janitor here? Why does she have to do such grueling work right in this company without me knowing anything about it?" Richard froze for a moment, his eyes blinking quickly. Then he smirked, slowly sitting down in the leather chair behind his desk, voice turning cold and condescending. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. Your mother wanted to work for extra income. So what if she's a janitor? I'm not obligated to report this to you." I stepped closer to the desk, fists clenched. My mother is 62 years old. Her back isn't straight anymore. Her hands tremble when she mops the floor. She doesn't say a word, just works silently. Do you really think that's normal? I took another step, eyes fixed on him. 5 years ago, Olivia herself told me she would care for my mother like family while I was away. Is this how she does it? Richard frowned, voice rising. You should remember where you are. This is my company. You're just an employee, a son-in-law in this family. And it was Olivia who suggested bringing her into work. We were short on janitors. I hired someone. What's wrong with that? He paused briefly, then continued decisively, as if concluding. She wanted to earn extra money. It's perfectly normal. Don't stir up trouble over personal matters. Those words were the final straw. I looked at the man I had once respected as a father-in-law and now saw only a cold person who disregarded everything. He tapped his fingers on the desk, as if my mother mopping floors was a trivial concern. I didn't say another word. I turned and walked to the door. He shouted after me, Daniel, you think you can just walk out like that? I didn't turn back. I strode quickly down to the hallway where my mother was working, each step heavy as lead. The corridor was still the same, long and endless, footsteps echoing. My eyes fixed on the sight of my mother still bent over mopping the floor. She pushed the cart slowly, sweat beading on her forehead, unaware of the confrontation that had just occurred. I approached, snatched the cleaning tools from her hands and threw them aside. The mop hit the floor with a loud thud, water splashing everywhere. The decisive action stunned those around us. Several employees stopped, staring curiously. My mother looked up sharply, face pale. Daniel, what are you doing? I grasped her hand tightly, pulling her to stand, not giving her time to react. Her hand was ice cold and trembling. She panicked, trying to stop me. She feared I was causing a big scene, afraid it would affect my job. But when she saw the burning anger on my face, eyes red, jaw clenched, she couldn't say another word. She just looked at me, tears welling up. Under the curious and surprised gazes of those around, employees whispering, some pulling out phones, I pulled my mother away from the building. Each step heavy but resolute, my hand gripping hers tightly as if afraid to let go and lose her. We walked through the hallway, through the main doors, out into the blazing Los Angeles sun. A gentle breeze blew, but I felt a chill down my spine. I helped my mother into the car, opening the door for her to sit in the passenger seat. She sat silently, clutching her old handbag, saying nothing. I drove straight home, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. In my mind, only one thought remained. She would never have to return to that place again. Never. On the drive home, the atmosphere in the car was oppressively heavy. I glanced at my mother a few times. She was staring out the window, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. She didn't sob out loud, just quietly wiped them away with her sleeve. I wanted to say something to comfort her, but my throat tightened. The anger still burned hot in my chest, mixed with the pain of thinking about what she had endured. For 5 years in Sweden, I had worked tirelessly to expand the market for Lane Global Logistics, sending money home regularly, believing my mother was living comfortably. And now, she had to mop floors, endure contemptuous glances right in my father-in-law's company. And Olivia, my wife, was the one who suggested it? Richard Lane's words still echoed in my head. It was Olivia who suggested bringing her into work. How could she? What had we promised each other when we got married? The car passed through the crowded streets of Los Angeles, afternoon sunlight slanting through the windshield. I tried to stay calm, driving slowly, but my hands still gripped the steering wheel tightly. My mother occasionally glanced at me, eyes full of worry. I knew that if I spoke now, the anger would explode. I needed time to sort my thoughts. When we got home, I parked in the garage and helped my mother inside. She walked slowly as if her whole body was exhausted. I led her to the sofa and poured her a glass of water. Mom, rest. I'll take care of everything. All that day, I didn't ask my mother anything. I knew Margaret Hughes, my mother's personality, well. If pressed, she would deny it, take all the blame on herself, and try to smooth things over. She had always been like that. Since my father died early, she had grown used to silent sacrifice to protect me. I did it willingly, son. Don't worry. I knew she would say that, even as her heart shattered piece by piece. I didn't want to force her to reopen wounds she had hidden for years. The root of this wasn't with her. It was with Olivia and Richard. I would wait until evening when Olivia returned. Then I would make everything clear, no more avoiding. In my heart, I had decided I wouldn't let things slide ambiguously. For 5 years away, I had endured enough. Endured the condescending looks from the Lane family, endured my position as the hired son-in-law. Now it was over. I would confront it head on. I quietly watched my mother go about her daily chores, and the more I observed, the clearer a heartbreaking truth became. She did housework almost unconsciously, each movement seamless, without thought, as if she was too accustomed to knowing what to do and when. She went into the kitchen, took the exact cup from the third cabinet, brewed tea without looking at the label, wiped the table without missing a spot. My mother knew precisely where everything was. The spoon in the left drawer, the cleaning cloth on the rack under the sink. Which task to do first, which next? Sweep before mopping, wash dishes before clearing the table. No hesitation or rest. She moved like a machine, like someone long accustomed to the role of servant, not the lady of the house or an aging mother who deserved rest. I sat in the living room pretending to read a book, but my eyes never left her. Every task she performed felt like a knife cut into my heart. She had been turned into a maid in her own son's home. How long had this been going on? I didn't even know. Or since right after I left for Sweden. I recalled video calls with her. She always smiled, always said, "I'm doing great now. Focus on your work, son." Now I understood what was behind that smile. Night fell. Streetlights outside the window began to glow. Olivia came home as usual, the dry click of her key in the lock echoing. She walked in, face slightly tired but still composed. I didn't ask where she had been all night. I didn't show concern. We looked at each other for a second, then she went straight to the bedroom to change. My mother emerged from the kitchen, forcing a smile. "Olivia, you're back. Dinner's ready. If you haven't eaten, come join us." We sat at the dinner table in a heavy atmosphere, no one speaking. The clink of cutlery against plates sounded lonely. My mother sat in the middle, trying to serve food to everyone, but her hands trembled. Olivia ate slowly, eyes on her plate, avoiding me. I swallowed bites without tasting anything, mind focused only on the upcoming confrontation. Mid-meal, Olivia suddenly looked up, tone more commanding than requesting. "Mom, get me a glass of water." She said it to my mother as if it were obvious. My mother instinctively stood up immediately, the action so natural it sent hot blood rushing through me. She went to the kitchen, poured water, and placed it in front of Olivia. I gripped my spoon tightly, trying to hold back until dinner ended, but my heart pounded. The anger began to boil. Before the tension could ease, Olivia spoke again, face frowning. "The soup is too salty today. It doesn't suit my taste at all. Fix it, Mom. Add some water to dilute it." She said it to my mother as if she were the private chef. My mother started to stand, but at that point I could no longer restrain myself. The anger pent up all day erupted. I slammed my spoon down on the table, the sharp sound ringing out. "If you're not satisfied, go into the kitchen and make it yourself. Why do you keep ordering Mom around like a servant?" Olivia froze for a moment, eyes wide in shock. Then she stood up immediately, reacting angrily. "What did you say? You have no right to yell at me over something small. I've been working all day and I'm exhausted. Do you even know that?" My mother quickly stood between us, trying to intervene. "Stop it, both of you. Don't argue. It's my fault for adding too much salt. I'll fix the soup. Don't fight over something trivial." She took the blame, voice full of worry, hoping we would stop to avoid escalation. But Olivia not only didn't calm down, but turned to criticize my mother. "It's all because of you. Because of you, my husband and I are fighting. You being here just makes everything messy." That was the final straw. I couldn't take it anymore. Rage surpassed all limits. I stood up abruptly, raised my hand, and slapped Olivia right in front of my mother. The slap rang out sharply. Olivia staggered, clutching her cheek, eyes wide in shock. "How dare you hit me? My parents never laid a hand on me growing up, and you dare to do this?" I looked straight at her, voice trembling with anger, but each word clear, pent up for so long. "I hit you because for the past 2 days I've seen with my own eyes how my mother is treated like a maid, and you act like it's normal." Olivia gripped her bag strap tightly, anger overriding the pain, voice rising defensively. "I never forced Mom to do everything. She's used to it and does it herself. Don't blow it out of proportion." I didn't look away, voice dropping lower but heavy on the room's atmosphere. "You know Mom is old. You know she works as a janitor all day, yet when you come home you still let her stand in the kitchen cooking dinner and cleaning everything alone. Don't you feel any guilt or shame at all?" Olivia paused briefly, then laughed mockingly, eyes showing clear irritation. "You're overreacting. She does it willingly. No one's forcing her." My mother burst into tears, quickly stepping between us, trembling hands clutching mine, voice breaking with panic. "Daniel, stop. Please, I beg you. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have let things get like this. Don't let your marriage fall apart because of me." She gripped my hand tighter, hot tears falling, voice choked but still trying. "I can handle it. As long as you live peacefully, I can endure a little more." I looked at her, chest tightening, then turned to Olivia, voice low but resolute beyond shaking. "I can't hold back anymore. I've been silent long enough, and that silence is what let things go this far. I'm taking Mom out of this house right now." Olivia smirked, eyes cold and contemptuous, voice decisive. "Fine then. Go wherever you want. Take her as far from my sight as possible." I grasped my mother's hand tightly and pulled her away from the house that was no longer a home. She resisted weakly, sobbing, but I was firm. Before stepping out, I looked back at Olivia with eyes full of fury and despair. She stood there, hand still on her cheek, eyes red but filled with hatred. From that moment, I knew our marriage was beyond saving. We stepped outside. The night wind blew bitterly cold. I opened the car door and helped my mother in. She sat silently, sniffling. I drove away, not knowing where, just needing to leave that place. My mind reeled, but my heart was full of determination. From now on, I would protect my mother no matter the cost. The car drove along the deserted nighttime roads of Los Angeles, streetlights casting long, dragging shadows. I had no specific plan. I only knew I couldn't return to that house anymore. The house that had once been a home, now just a place filled with resentment and pretense. My mother sat in the passenger seat, clutching her old handbag tightly, tears still silently streaming down her face. She tried to wipe them away, but the more she wiped, the wetter they became. "Don't do this, son. Turn back and make up with Olivia. I don't want your happiness to shatter like this." Her voice trembled, full of worry. I drove a bit further before turning into an apartment complex near downtown that a colleague had once mentioned for its 24-hour reception. I parked, went to the front desk, and quickly rented a one-bedroom unit with basic amenities. I paid for a month in advance, took the keys, and returned to the car. I helped my mother into the apartment, every gesture slow and careful, as if afraid of hurting her further. The unit was small, with simple furnishings, a worn sofa, a small dining table, a mini kitchen. Not luxurious like the old house, but clean and quiet. My mother sat on the chair, eyes filled with sadness as she looked at her son. Guilt was clear on her face, the deeper wrinkles, the red-rimmed eyes. She grasped my hand, whispering, "I'm sorry, son. I let this happen. Leave me here and go back home. Make up with Olivia before everything becomes too complicated and irreparable." I shook my head firmly, sitting beside her. Resolve was clear in my eyes. "I won't do that, Mom. I can't accept it. I've understood everything now. You don't need to keep smoothing things over, avoiding or enduring for anyone anymore. I know it all, about Olivia, about Richard, about what they did to you." My mother looked at me, eyes surprised. I continued, voice low and warm. "I'll stay with you. We'll face it all together. I won't abandon you again, not once in this life." She stared at me for a long time, as if making sure she hadn't misheard. Her eyes widened, then she suddenly burst into sobs. Tears she had held back for years poured out uncontrollably. She cried like a child, shoulders shaking, hand over her mouth. The pent-up grievance, endurance, and loneliness finally broke free. I sat beside her, silently letting her release what she had kept inside for so long. I hugged her, stroked her back, feeling the familiar warmth that 5 years of separation had nearly made me forget. When she gradually calmed, her tears soaking my shirt, I gently asked, "Mom, tell me everything. All that happened while I was away." My mother hesitated for a moment, then finally spoke. Her voice was soft and halting, as if each word caused more pain. She recounted everything that had happened in my absence, starting from how she was gradually treated like a maid. At first, Olivia still maintained kindness, but over time, the comments began. She said Olivia often remarked that she was idle, contributing nothing to the family. Small words that repeated and piled up until my mother no longer knew how to respond. She told of the pressure to get a job. Olivia said I should find something to do to be independent. Then she took me to Mr. Richard's company to work as a janitor, as a way to earn my own money so I wouldn't be a burden to her. My mother accepted it all so I wouldn't worry while far away. I thought if I stayed silent and endured, everything would look peaceful on the surface. Your family wouldn't be affected. You were working hard over there. I didn't want to distract you. Each of her words cut deep into me, leaving me stunned and in pain. I sat listening, heart tightening. Memories flooded back of when my father died early, leaving just the two of us relying on each other to survive. I remembered those years clearly. My mother did all sorts of jobs to raise me. Morning shifts at a food packaging plant, evenings cleaning a small office nearby. She left home before dawn and often returned after I'd finished homework. The fridge always had food ready for me, a portion of meat, a carton of milk, a few eggs, and she would say she'd already eaten, or just take a slice of bread with peanut butter. Her clothes were always from thrift stores, washed until faded, but whenever I asked, she just smiled and said as long as I studied well, she didn't mind the hardship. Compared to those memories, the contempt and disdain from the Lane family over the years hurt even more. They, wealthy and powerful, saw my mother as a burden, a servant. I recalled my years in the Lane family. I was always viewed as an outsider despite being the son-in-law and working for their company. At family gatherings, my opinions were rarely sought. Important decisions were made without my presence. Asset divisions, business plans. My achievements were seen as the duty of a hired worker, not contributions worth recognizing. When the Sweden project succeeded, credit went to the leadership and Richard Lane. When issues arose, I was the first seen as replaceable. Your performance hasn't met expectations. I gradually realized that in the eyes of my wife's family, I was never an equal. I was just the hired son-in-law, useful when needed and sidelined when not. And because I was in that position, my mother was never truly seen as family. She was just a poor mother-in-law, an inconvenient presence to be neatly managed or pushed out of sight. When reality pulled me back to the small apartment, I looked at my mother with different eyes. No longer hesitation or restraint. I grasped her hand, voice firm. "Mom, I promise. This will never happen again." In my heart, a clear resolve formed. From this moment, I would not only protect my mother but end the years of contempt no matter the cost. This marriage was over. My career at Lane Global too. I would start over, but this time with my mother by my side. We sat in the small apartment until late. My mother dozed off on the sofa. I covered her with a blanket. I watched her sleep, her face more peaceful than ever. My heart still ached, but also filled with hope. The past had taught me much, about my mother's sacrifices, about the falseness of power. Now it was time to act. The next morning I woke up very early while it was still dimly dark outside. The small apartment with neon lights filtering through the window felt unfamiliar but also relieving in a completely different way. No more the luxurious walls of the old house. No more the familiar sound of Olivia's footsteps behind me. From the slightly ajar bedroom door I could hear my mother's steady breathing, more peaceful than anything I had seen from her in years. I sat up, my mind unusually clear. Last night, after she had told me everything, I had barely slept, just lying there thinking it all over. This marriage, the job at Lane Global, it had all been chains I had willingly put on myself. And now, I knew it was time to break them. I opened my laptop and drafted a resignation email to the executive board of Lane Global Logistics Group. The content was brief and decisive. Dear Executive Board, I, Daniel Hughes, hereby formally submit my resignation effective today. I will complete the necessary handover procedures as required. Respectfully. I added no personal explanations. I hit send and closed the laptop. My heart raced, but not from fear, from relief. Less than half an hour later, my phone started ringing nonstop. The screen showed Richard Lane's name. I took a deep breath and answered. His voice came through sharp and furious. "Daniel, what the hell are you thinking? I just received your resignation email. Get back to the company right now and explain yourself clearly. Do you realize what you're doing? The European project is still waiting for your signature. If you quit like this, you're ruining everything." I listened silently as he vented his rage, from contract threats to reminders of my position in the company, and finally to undisguised coercion. "You'd better remember where you stand, Daniel. Don't think everything can run without you, without consequences." I kept my voice calm, neither high nor low. "I've decided to resign, and that decision won't change. I'll hand over all my work once the procedures are complete." With that, I ended the call and turned off the phone. About an hour later, it was Olivia's turn to call. Her voice was tense and rapid as soon as I picked up. "Daniel, have you gone mad? How dare you quit like that? You need to apologize to my father right now and get back to the company immediately, or you'll regret it." I didn't argue, just replied evenly. "This afternoon I'll come back to the house to give you something." "What are you talking about?" Olivia snapped. "You think that's it?" I didn't respond further. I hung up, She called back immediately, but I didn't answer. From then on, my phone kept vibrating with calls and messages from both Olivia and Richard Lane. Come back now. You're destroying everything. Who do you think you are to do this? I didn't reply to a single one. I silenced the phone, set it aside, and turned to make coffee and prepare a simple breakfast. My mother woke up looking at me with worried eyes. Did something just happen? I turned to her, smiling lightly, voice trying to stay calm. It's nothing, Mom. Let's have breakfast first. That afternoon, I drove back to the old house in a state of calm, as if the most important decisions had already been made long ago. The familiar road now felt strange. I parked at the gate and walked in without hesitation. When I opened the door and stepped inside, I saw my in-laws, Richard and Helen, along with Olivia, all present in the living room, clearly having waited for me for some time. Richard sat in the main chair, face flushed. Helen sat beside him, looking anxious. Olivia stood up, eyes red. You're back? I showed no surprise, no beating around the bush. I stood straight, looking directly at all three, and said clearly, leaving no room for retreat, I'm here today not to ask forgiveness or explain, but to end this marriage. The entire room fell silent for a few seconds. Olivia reacted first, voice rising in shock and fury. What did you just say, Daniel? What right do you have to demand a divorce? She stepped forward, eyes full of contempt. You think you can walk out of this marriage and still have a place? You'll lose everything, the house, your job, everything you've relied on. I just shook my head, not responding. My calmness distorted Olivia's face with rage. Richard Lane let out a mocking laugh, devoid of any warmth. You're acting no different from an impulsive fool, Daniel. He looked me up and down, voice slow but full of pressure. A man in your position has no right to unilaterally end anything when everything is still in the Lane family's hands. Richard leaned back in his chair, continuing as if stating an obvious fact. And you'd better remember the prenuptial agreement you signed. If we divorce, you'll have no claim to any assets, including this house. Helen spoke last, voice softer but not hiding the calculation. Daniel, calm down. Don't let momentary emotions ruin your future. She looked at me, adding slowly, You've reached this position thanks to our family. If you leave, you'll have nothing left. Think wisely. I smiled faintly. Not a challenging smile, but one of someone who had seen through everything. My voice remained even, cold and firm. My decision is final and I won't change it. I placed the divorce papers on the table and slid them toward Olivia. If you don't agree to settle amicably, it will go to court. Without waiting for any further reaction, I turned and walked out of that house, closing behind me not just a door, but the entire contempt and power the Lane family had once thought they held firmly. Behind me, the room sank into silence. I didn't need to look back to feel their stunned gazes and bewilderment, the three people who had believed they could dictate my marriage and career. For the first time, I knew they understood that I was no longer under their control, that Daniel Hughes had truly left and would never return to his old position. I drove back to the rented apartment, the afternoon wind blowing through the open window, carrying the smell of road dust and faint salt from the distant sea. My mind felt strangely light, as if an invisible burden had been lifted. The years of endurance trying to prove my worth in the Lane family, all of it ended with the divorce papers on the table. I thought about my mother waiting for me in the small apartment, probably worried sick. She would ask questions, try to persuade me to go back. But no. This time I would stand firm. It had taken me too long to realize that their power was an illusion. And now it was time to reclaim my life. When I arrived, my mother was sitting on the sofa holding a cup of cold tea. She looked up as I entered, eyes full of anxiety. Where have you been, son? Did you go to make up with Olivia? I sat beside her, taking her hand. I've filed for divorce, Mom, and quit the company. We're starting over. My mother froze, tears welling up. Have you thought this through, Daniel? Giving up everything like this, life ahead will be very hard, son. But I hugged her and whispered, I've thought it through, Mom. No matter how hard it gets, I can handle it, as long as you don't have to suffer anymore. Don't worry about me. In the days that followed, we lived quietly in the rented apartment together. The pace of life slowed, free of tension or fear. I woke early to make coffee. My mother cooked simple meals, vegetable soup, toasted bread, like in the old days back home. She gradually regained the peace she had lost for years. She smiled more, had more energy, slept deeper. We walked in the nearby park. She told old stories and I listened. The small apartment became a true home, not grand but full of warmth. In contrast to that calm, signs of trouble began emerging at Lane Global Logistics Group. I learned about it through a close former colleague, Mark, the guy I'd worked with on the Sweden project. He called me a few days later, voice full of concern. "Daniel, the company's in chaos. Why did you quit so suddenly?" Mark filled me in on the details. Key overseas partners received notices that the person handling negotiations and upcoming signings would no longer be Daniel Hughes, but a new representative appointed by the corporation. A young guy lacking specialized experience and negotiation skills pushed up by Richard to replace me. The partners' reactions were almost immediate. They requested postponements of scheduled meetings, citing the need for time to reconsider. A major partner in Stockholm emailed, "Our company needs further discussion on this contract. We will follow up later." Mark said leadership tried to persuade them, but to no avail. Some partners were outright dissatisfied. They called Mark directly, asking about me. "Where's Daniel? We only trust him. He really cared about our feedback." They felt the entire partnership had been built on personal trust with me, not any title or replacement. The late-night calls and emails I'd exchanged, the long flights for face-to-face meetings, all of it had created that trust. Now they wouldn't accept someone new. Mark added that agreements thought to be finalized had to be reopened for review simply because partners refused the substitute. A big contract in Oslo was completely suspended. They demanded a full reevaluation of pricing and timelines, as if nothing had ever been agreed upon. I knew exactly what that meant. Not that my departure caused the collapse, but that from the start, their trust had never been in the name Lane Global. Mark said internal chaos was mounting. Leadership couldn't agree on a solution. Richard shouted in meetings, but no one had answers. The legal department was constantly explaining unfinished commitments, drafting apology letters, negotiating extensions. From those scattered pieces of information, I understood that my leaving wasn't just a temporary difficulty. It was directly stalling strategic contracts worth hundreds of millions. The European project, my brainchild, was shaking. I had thought they could replace me easily, but now they couldn't. A fleeting satisfaction passed through me, mixed with complexity. Not revenge, but the inevitable consequence of disdain. After days of silence, Richard called me directly. The phone rang in the afternoon. His name appeared. I answered. His voice no longer sharp or commanding, but hurried and clearly strained. "Thank God you picked up. Listen, we need to talk." From the first sentences, I sensed the change. Richard no longer scolded, but kept emphasizing contract deadlines, partner pressure, and the risk of collapse if delays continued. "The Swedish partners are threatening to cancel. Do you know that? Hundreds of millions are on the line." Through his roundabout talk and gradually lowering tone, I realized the company could no longer manage on its own and was facing the loss of its most critical deals. He asked me to return, not as an order, but almost pleading, "Come back, just sign the remaining contracts. We'll forget the past." I listened to the end, then refused firmly. "I've left the company, and I won't return no matter the consequences." The call ended in heavy silence. For the first time, I felt Richard Lane's power no longer worked on me. He, the man who had seen me as subordinate, now had to lower his voice. Not long after that call, there was a hesitant knock at the apartment door. I opened it. Olivia stood before me, and in that moment I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was disheveled, face gaunt, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep, no longer the polished makeup or familiar confidence. She stood silent for a few seconds, as if gathering all her courage, then spoke, voice hoarse and trembling. "I know I have no right to say these things, but I was really wrong. I'm sorry, to you and to Mom, for everything I did while you were away." My mother stood behind me, slightly awkward. Olivia looked at her, eyes clearly lowered. I didn't think about Mom's feelings, didn't realize she was older and had to endure so much. I was too selfish, only thinking of myself without seeing how I was hurting others. She turned back to me, voice hurried, as if afraid I'd close the door any second. "The company is in chaos now, Daniel. Partners won't continue. Contracts thought finalized are all stalled. Dad can't handle it. Everything's spiraling out of our family's control." She paused, took a deep breath, voice slower and lower. "But I'm not here just for the company. I've thought a lot about us, about the early days. Your first trip, the nights you stayed up for work while I just relied on you without appreciating it." Olivia spoke with remorse, eyes pleading. "Can we start over, Daniel? I know I was wrong, but I really want to fix it. I'll change. I'll treat Mom well. I won't let things be like before." I looked at her for a long time. No anger, no wavering, just a cold clarity. When I spoke, my voice was slow and clear. "What you're saying now should have been said long ago, Olivia." She stiffened, lips trembling, trying to hold on. "I truly regret it. I know it's too late now, but I don't want to lose you like this." I shook my head, gently blocking the door, not letting my mother step forward again. "I can't go back, not for the company or contracts, but because I've seen everything too clearly. I can't let Mom endure more, and I can't continue in a marriage like that." I closed the door slowly but decisively. As it shut, I knew that on the other side wasn't just a remorseful woman, but the entire past I had chosen to release. When Olivia left in silence, I stood behind the closed door and understood that the balance of power had truly shifted. The things the Lane family had taken for granted, my submission, my mother's endurance, and the position they thought they held firmly, were collapsing faster than they imagined. For the first time, I no longer felt pushed into weakness, only a clear calm in realizing I had completely stepped out of their control. I returned to the living room. My mother was still sitting on the sofa, her gaze fixed on the door that had just closed, her face heavy with thought. She didn't ask what had happened, didn't blame or advise, just sighed very softly and said, "I know you've thought about this a lot before making this decision." I sat down beside her and took her hand. "It's over, Mom. I don't regret this decision at all." My mother nodded slowly, her eyes still filled with the worry of a mother who always feared her child would suffer loss. She gently squeezed my hand, as if wanting to say something but holding back. I hugged her, feeling the familiar warmth, and for the first time in a long while, I believed that no matter how difficult the road ahead, we were walking in freedom, no longer bowing our heads or living in fear. A few weeks later, unfavorable news began appearing relentlessly on major financial and economic channels. At first, it was just small articles, but gradually they followed one another like a flood. I followed them on my phone through online news sites, not out of curiosity or schadenfreude, but because part of my life had once been tied to that place. One morning, while making coffee for my mother, I opened the news app and saw the first headline: Lane Global Logistics Group faces international contract crisis. The article detailed how major deals were stalled, with many partners pulling out at the last minute. It quoted internal sources. "The sudden change in the responsible person has caused trust to collapse." I read carefully, my heart beating a little faster. The media mentioned the corporation's severe loss of credibility due to the key negotiator change at a critical stage. They didn't name me directly, but alluded clearly. The individual who had led the European project abruptly resigned, leaving a gap that could not be filled in time. International partners no longer trusted them. They demanded meeting cancellations and contract reviews. I remembered those contracts well, Hundreds of millions of dollars, midnight calls with partners in Stockholm and Oslo. Now everything was shaking because of Richard's arrogance. The corporation's stock plummeted shortly after. I watched the chart on a stock app. A glaring red curve, market value dropping sharply in a short time. From sky-high levels, it now fell without breaks, analysts commented. Pressure from shareholders and banks is mounting. Lane Global risks bankruptcy if it cannot salvage the situation. I imagined Richard sitting in his office, face ashen, watching the news. He had once smirked when I quit. What about now? Not long after, an internal scandal was exposed, stemming from an investigation into governance misconduct during the crisis. It started as rumors on financial forums, but then major newspapers jumped in. I read the first article in the Wall Street Journal. Lane Global chairman embroiled in affair scandal amid company turmoil. They revealed a long-standing extramarital relationship between Richard and his personal secretary, the very young woman I had seen in his office the day I stormed in to confront him. The affair had occurred while he held the top executive position, abusing power to cover it up. The media heavily exploited the ethical and power abuse angles. Articles followed one after another, linking the contract crisis, poor governance, and the affair into an irreparable chain of collapse. From million-dollar deals to office secrets, a Bloomberg headline. They interviewed former employees and dug up details, joint business trips, leaked private emails. The patriarchal, exemplary image Richard Lane had built, he often appeared on TV with a confident smile talking about family values and humanism, completely crumbled. He became a laughingstock. The stock fell further. I followed it all through news updates, sitting beside my mother in the small apartment. She glanced at the screen for a moment, then turned to me, voice slow and low. "You don't need to concern yourself with that anymore." I briefly explained what was happening. She shook her head lightly, placing her hand on mine. "I don't care what happens to them. I just want you to be at peace." Hearing her say that, I suddenly understood that this collapse wasn't due to my revenge or intent to push anyone into ruin. It was the inevitable consequence of what the Lane family had done over the years. They were accustomed to looking down on others, using power to impose their will, and when that foundation crumbled, they had nothing left to cling to. I didn't feel vindictive or gleeful, just that everything was returning to its proper place. Sometimes life doesn't need anyone to intervene. It arranges justice on its own. Alongside the corporate crisis, the personal lives of my wife's family also fell apart quickly. Entertainment and financial news reported Helen filing for separation, followed by divorce. She, the woman who had tried to mediate in our final meeting, now appeared in tabloids. Wife of Lane Global chairman files for divorce amid affair scandal. They quoted anonymous sources. Mrs. Helen could no longer tolerate the betrayal. The image of the powerful family they had flaunted, lavish parties, smiling family photos, ended. Helen disappeared from high society. Rumors said she moved to live alone. Olivia gradually vanished from social events. She had once been the center, appearing beside her parents at galas, her name tied to power and status. Now she faded. I saw online reports. Lane heiress withdraws from high society. She deleted her accounts, no more glamorous check-ins. I imagined her sitting alone facing the collapse. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings between Olivia and me were completed quietly. No asset disputes, no drama, as I had chosen from the start. The lawyer called. The divorce has been signed by both parties and approved by the court. When all legal ties ended, I felt a relief unlike any before. Not because of winning or losing, but because I had escaped a toxic cycle. I sat on the sofa watching my mother read a book and exhaled deeply. I continued living with my mother in the small apartment. Life flowed steadily and far simpler than before. Each day passed without invisible tensions, without the feeling of having to watch my words or endure. My mother no longer flinched at the doorbell, no longer habitually worried when the phone rang. The apartment was cramped, but it was the first place in years where my mother could live without fearing she was bothering someone or making anyone uncomfortable. Watching her gradually regain her natural smile, I knew my decision to leave had been right. Not for the job, not for pride or rivalry, but for the peace of the only person in my life who had never turned away from me. And seeing her live in peace, I knew I hadn't traded everything away meaninglessly. After all ties with the Lane family were severed, the divorce papers signed, the resignation finalized, and the harassing calls gradually tapering off, I stood before a vast emptiness. The small rented apartment now felt like temporary shelter, but I knew we couldn't stay there forever. My mother, though more at peace, still worried about the future. "Son, now that you're no longer working at the company, how will the two of us live?" She asked me every day, eyes full of sorrow. I hugged her and whispered, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of it. This time I'll decide my own path." And then, I made a decision I had never dared to consider before, starting my own company. The idea came suddenly but clearly. I had spent 5 years in Sweden expanding the logistics market for Lane Global. I knew the field inside out, from international contract negotiations to supply chain management. Why not do it myself? No need for grand scale or power. Just leverage what I had. I spent hours drafting plans, calculating on scratch paper. The early days of starting up were full of hardships. Finances were tight, savings from my old salary plus a bit from selling unnecessary items. Every expense had to be calculated carefully. Renting a small office in the Los Angeles suburbs, just enough space for a desk and an old computer. Minimal staff, at first just me, then hiring a young assistant with low pay. I did everything. Calling old partners, drafting contracts, even driving small deliveries myself. There were sleepless nights worrying about due bills. Can I really do this? I asked myself, watching my mother sleep soundly in the small room. But then I remembered her, all she had endured to raise me, and knew I had to try harder. I leveraged all my experience, personal reputation, and relationships built over the years. The European partners who had trusted me at Lane Global, I called them, not to beg, but to propose new collaboration. "I wanted to inform you that I've left Lane Global and am building my own company in the same field," I said straightforwardly, voice calm. "I believe what we've worked on together before is enough for you to understand how I operate, and the commitments I always keep. If you're interested in a new partnership, I'm very open to serious and transparent discussions." At first they were surprised, but they agreed to meet. I didn't rush or try to show off. A budget flight to Stockholm, a simple coffee meeting on a street corner. I took it step by step. In the meetings, I didn't talk much about grand plans or lofty promises, but reminded them of what we had done together. "Do you remember last year's project?" I said calmly. "How we handled the toughest parts and why everything still stayed on schedule in the end?" They looked at me for a moment, then nodded with a slight smile. No need for more words. I knew they remembered, and more importantly, they still trusted. Gradually, long-term clients and partners started reaching out proactively, not because of my company's size, the small office, simple sign, but because they knew how I worked and how I had kept my word over the years. One afternoon, I got a call from Oslo. The voice on the other end paused for a few seconds, then spoke familiarly. "Daniel, we need someone we can trust," he said slowly. "Are you still in the field?" I replied. "I am, and this time I'll be fully responsible." He didn't ask much more, just said briefly, "Then we're reassured. We only trust you." That was the first contract I signed under my own company's name. Not large, just domestic transport in Europe, but enough to get things moving. No flashy signing ceremony, no flowery congratulations. When the first payment hit the account, I sat quietly for a moment, then paid the pending bills and stopped by the supermarket to buy some good food for my mother. She looked at the bags and smiled gently. "My son, you've done it." The first contracts were signed quietly but provided a foundation for growth. From one small deal to 2, then 3. Clients referred each other. Daniel Hughes, the guy who used to work for Lane but now independent. very reliable. I worked hard, making daily calls, tracking every shipment. There were tiring moments, but coming home to my mother waiting with dinner gave me motivation. As operations stabilized, I expanded gradually. Hired 2 more employees, an accountant and a logistics specialist. I recruited suitable people, including some who had worked at Richard's company and lost their jobs after the bankruptcy. Mark, my old colleague, called. "Daniel, the old company's gone. Got a spot for me." I took him on because I knew he was good. The company grew steadily under tight control. No extravagance, no big parties, no flashy advertising. No chasing power or fame like I'd seen at Lane Global, where everything was just for show. Finances gradually stabilized. From initial losses to small profits. I saved and invested wisely. Then one day I bought a new house with full amenities. Not extravagant like the old one, but cozy, with a small garden and spacious kitchen. In the Los Angeles suburbs, near a park. I took my mother to see it. "From now on, this will be our new home," she cried. "I don't need a fancy house, son. Just seeing you stand strong like this puts me at ease." We moved in, arranging things. Her old books, vintage family photos. This was a true home, enough for the 2 of us to start a proper life. Each day I went to work with initiative and calm. Woke early, drove to the small office, met with staff, called partners. No more pressure from Richard, no more feeling like a hired hand. Evenings I returned home for relaxed dinners with my mother. She cooked favorites, grilled meat with vegetables, and told old stories. We laughed, watched TV. She no longer worried about money, no longer did endless chores. Now she focused on resting and truly enjoying her later years. Watching her laugh freely, no longer guarded or anxious, I knew my decision to leave had been right. Not for the job, not for pride or rivalry, but for the peace of the only person in my life who had never turned away from me. And seeing her live happily, I knew I hadn't traded everything away meaninglessly. Looking back on the journey, I understood that a person's value doesn't lie in belonging to a powerful family or standing under a big name, but in how they treat those who have been with them from the beginning. I once believed power was everything. Big contracts, impressive numbers, a position others feared. But when Lane Global collapsed, I still stood firm. Not because of power, but because I had my mother beside me. I also realized that silent endurance isn't always true patience. Sometimes staying only prolongs the hurt, and leaving at the right time is the only way to protect what matters most. My mother once chose to endure for me. I chose to leave for her. That choice left me with no regrets. My story ends with a simple but clear lesson. Power can change, money can vanish, but character and family bonds are what determine whether a person stands firm or falls when everything else disappears. And when I see my mother smiling in our small home, I know I chose the right path.